start from the centre.
Obviously, there's a lot of stories that circling in the media. The main misconception, in my opinion, a lot of people do, a lot of non-Muslims have the idea that terrorists think that when they die, they'll go to heaven, where there'll be a certain number of virgins or whatever. And obviously, it's not just a British idea. There are, I'm sure everyone's aware of the cartoon brother of the Prophet Muhammad in one of the European countries. I was just wondering, is this has someone just taken a part of the Quran or something from the Hadith and misinterpreted it, or is this just like fabrication in itself?
A bit of both from both sides, because you will find in some of the jihadi literature, which are perhaps not proscribed, in the before terrorism law 2000, not 2006, 2010, a lot of stuff was available on the internet and people were freely motivating themselves by reading such stuff. And there would be reports from the hadith which mention the bounties that one would experience in paradise should one was to die in the path of God. And that's typically a mujahid, one who performs jihad and gets killed in the way of God. And there are reports which talk about 70 or 72 virgins and wide-eyed, very beautiful women, houris in paradise. These are concepts rooted in the Quran as well, about the houris and so on. The difficulty is now that when Muslim jihadi websites and literature talked about these things, they talked about out of context without understanding the people in terms of the development, how they are meant to be taught and come close to God. And it was fired by a context of grievances. It could be a political struggle for freedom in Palestine or Iraq or Afghanistan and so forth. And there are also observable and knowable, not oppression, but we would say oppression, I would say oppression, but to an objective person it might be, or more objective person it might be just crimes committed against them, like what happened in Bosnia and parts of Philippines or and so on, Burma. They would then get this hadith to motivate themselves to fight back, because they don't know what else to do. The government won't do anything, UN is not doing much, the Muslim body seems to be very mute and impotent, so they would take matters in their own hands, inspired by this hadith, and then go on and commit an atrocity in a foolish, reckless manner, or in a sinful, irresponsible way. And then they mention this hadith. So they have misused some traditions. On the other side, of course, the non-Muslim media, then they will pick up on that, and then they'll be a little bit irresponsible in how they write, and perhaps end up bringing further problems on the Muslims in general. So it's a bit of both on both sides, but there are traditions which talk about paradise, these eternal rewards, which are special for Muslims who fight and die in the cause of God.
What I have concluded from this lecture and also from some other lectures on terrorism is that the two main causes of terrorism is ignorance and revenge. So, in most of the lectures which I have attended, they talk on ignorance mostly, that the people are ignorant, those who commit suicide bombing and terrorism, and they should show patience and these sort of things. But I am amazed that people are not focusing, I may say, they are not that much focusing on the revenge part of it. Like, how can we consider the revenge factor? Now that can be controlled only if those who are so-called like superpowers in this world, they show responsibilities, and especially the media also plays some of their role. Like in this lecture, I can say that we have talked a lot about saying that people are ignorant, those who commit suicide bombing, and especially that they are not showing patience. So I'm not saying we should also work on this factor, but like there are more than one factor. So I would strongly suggest that people should also keep in mind, like I know I'm from an area which is very close to the area where there was a school of children, and all of the children, they were under 15. But that school was bombed and hundreds of children were killed in it. So I may say that yes, the people still show patience, because Islam doesn't teach you to commit suicide bombing and these sort of things against millions and these people. But also the world should show some responsibilities in these sectors. I may say that the money which the world powers they are spending on the war against terror if they spend the same money on educating those people, they will get a better result. So I may say that the world is focusing on war against terror through terror. They should commit a war against terror through education and justice.
Yes, you may say that quite correctly, and I will support you on that. I can't disagree with most things that you said. Would you mind saying where you come from? Kashmir, is it?
No, I'm from Pakistan.
Pakistan?
Yes.
The bomb by whom?
I'm actually from Peshawar, so that area is quite close to the tribal areas.
Yeah, I've been to Peshawar, by the way.
Okay.
I've been to Kashmir as well.
Okay.
But I think no. So I can't disagree with you. But the point is, when we say that the world power should do something, put more money into education, perhaps also causes of poverty and deprivation, dispossession, all these kind of things. These things take time, and these things should be raised, but then there are channels and bodies and mechanisms in place which may not be satisfactory, but they should be pursued. Now, if they are being pursued, no matter what the speed is, if they are being pursued, either we improve on that, add value, or we just let it be, but we don't take matters into our own hands and say, it's not fast enough, therefore I'm going to go and knock some heads together. Okay? That's the thing. But I agree with you, yes, it should be done.
My request is that these points should be kept in mind in these sort of lectures.
Okay.
Because if we focus on the education point of view, so I know because the average income of a family in those areas is £10 per month.
Right.
So how can they educate their people? So we will get very little from that. So we should also keep these points in mind.
Yes, we should do that. But I'd like to add one point to that though. Sometimes, I just came back from Hajj, and sometimes you see, even in a country like Saudi Arabia, which is supposed to be fabulously wealthy, but sometimes you wonder because of what you see there happening, and who's actually benefiting from the wealth in particular. So even in countries like that, and most Muslim countries don't have what is called a proper welfare system, or anything approaching a proper welfare system. Who is to blame for that? Do you think the Western world, Mr. Bush, Britain, or do you think sometimes the Muslims themselves have failed in their own responsibilities?
I think everybody should have a responsibility as an individual. So, like my point of view in this question is just to remind all the people here that while talking on the war against terror, you should also focus on these debates.
That's what we have made. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. No, that's a valid point, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
I agree with you.
You talked earlier in the lecture about the issue of authority, both political and ideological and social.
Judicial.
Yes, and as you just mentioned now, you're touching upon the issue of places like Saudi Arabia and perhaps Saudi scholars and so on. Now, the issue is a lot of why the current ideology of terrorism is quite rampant is the fact that many people have lost confidence in what is termed scholars. And as far as authorities are concerned, we're talking about the authority to actually declare who has that authority, something like, say, the dictators throughout the Middle East.
Yes, very good point.
Who are the oppressors in that.
These are realities we couldn't bring up in the lecture, and that's why there should be discussion like this. Because most, if not all, the top authorities, rulers, governments, and so on, seems to be there who are not sincere, to say the least, in supporting the welfare of their own citizens, of the country. They seem to be there as proxies for other interests, Western powers or Eastern, other interests. Nowadays, it's a little bit shallow to say just Western, because you need to consider about corporations and multinationals as well. So those are those streams as well that come into life. And then the point about people losing confidence in scholars, some of it is because of, again, anger. Because some of them seem to be the scholars as government agents, spokesmen for whatever the government say, they'll top the line and control the people on their behalf, as it were. So, I mean, that's not completely unjustified to have that feeling. But some of it is not, because some of it is also because people have not had the patience to even learn from others who are not perhaps government agents. But it's a very good point. Those two streams you mentioned are very enriching. We can talk more later perhaps. Thank you.
Can I just remind our audience to fill in the feedback forms they've got? If you've got any written questions, please pass them on to the front as well.
Written questions there. So I wanted to ask about Iraq, Palestine, Afghanistan invasions. If the Mujahideen just fought the army there, is it jihad? And us going there to fight, is it from Islam? When the Russians came into Afghanistan in the first instance, in the 80s, early 80s, you had certain scholars, including Ibn Taymiyyah, and Al-Albani, actually saying that it was incumbent on you to go and fight, and even if it wasn't incumbent on you, then what is happening there merits a fight back, meaning jihad, from the local Muslims. Since then, people have had other understandings because the reality was not so clear-cut. It wasn't like a Russian communist regime has come in and persecuting the Muslims. Muslims, no matter what ilk and type they are, fighting back against the open enemy who are persecuting. It wasn't like that. And that became very apparent as the Russians withdrew. When the Muslims began to fight Muslims in Afghanistan, it was terrible. What happened was very, very bad. A lot of Mujahideen of Muslims died at the hands of each other because of what factions they belonged to, which group, liberating party they belonged to. It's an openly known, understood thing. In Iraq nowadays, we have a problem which is very, very difficult. It's not just Muslims trying to fight against, or Muslim Iraqis trying to fight against a foreign occupation who happen to be of a different religion as well on top. There are Muslims fighting Muslims. There are Shia and Sunni issue there. Again, of course, conspiracy theories are there and suspicions is there. You would say some of those bombs are actually planted by the Americans to incite. Then they'll say no, some are actually done by the Al-Qaeda itself to get the Shia and Sunni to fight. You have all sorts of things like that. But there are genuine problems among Shia and Sunni. Kurds, most of them are Sunnis. They're classed as their leader. Because if you lump them with the Sunnis, then the Sunnis form the majority, even now. But they have a problem with the Sunnis, other Sunnis, non-Kurdish Sunnis, and the Shias. And they're mixed. You have that problem. You have even Sunni scholars actually now forming themselves, scholars or tribal leaders at least, forming themselves into armed groups to fight against what they deem to be Al-Qaeda extremists, who are then deemed to be in cahoots with the Americans, who are then fought against by the Muqtada al-Sadr's group because they are not pro-American, but who are then subdued by the other mainstream Shia group who say, well, we should buy time and get our authority first. It's very confusing. Who's fighting who? Where is authority? How do you involve yourself in an arena like that? So when Afghanistan happened, most Afghan veterans, people who had gone from Britain, who had gone from other countries in the 80s, being supported by the British government and the CIA, and of course by the, even you had the American troops supplying guns, map, all sorts of things in the border areas in Kashmir, and so on. I know for a fact, okay? I'm not speaking from reading up. Okay, there will be American experts, advisors, actually supplying guns and maps and information to the Mujahideen going across the border. And the Pakistan army will give covering fire. And they'll slip it through the mountains. I know this for a fact. One of them was actually what they call Green Beret, a person who was a Muslim. So he left the Green Beret and he became a Mujahid and he fought in Kashmir. But they all knew at that time when Afghanistan chaos happened to withdraw, because now it's not clear-cut. So in answer to your second question, should we go to fight there? The answer is a clear, resounding no. Because Muslims have an obligation to fulfill their contracts and duties. The area is very confusing to say the least. Is it really jihad to make the word of Allah supreme? Take the classic definition, classic book definition. Is it really to make the word of God supreme? In what way? By whom? What's the interpretation? You know, it may sound ridiculous, but we have to say, whose Sharia? Whose Sharia? You don't make the mistake of thinking that you put the Quran in one hand and a whole cluster of hadith books in the other and say, Sharia. No. Sharia, and the majority of it is fiqh. It's a process, it's an interpretation, and they're different. And just like the English Constitution, you do not have the Sharia given to you in a book. Here you go, brother, the Sharia. You just can't do it. So what are you fighting for? What are you fighting for? So these invasions are wrong. There are political processes afoot. There are ways and means to perhaps challenge it. What the local people are doing against their occupiers, driven by whatever their ideology, you don't have to get involved. You may try to bring some solutions, stop the fighting, get them to negotiate. You can do that type of stuff. But to join in the fray, in a fight where everybody's fighting everybody else and you don't know what it's for, in the end you get killed or you kill someone. Are you going to paradise? Is it what God loves? Is it justice you're bringing about? What are you doing? So it is difficult to talk about these things. In the days of international relations, open borders, in the days of crumbling nation states, what does it mean? What do you talk about? What is your Darul Islam, Darul Haq? Where is that? What do you mean by this? So, coming to you. So, invasions are wrong. They should leave the countries. They need to leave it in a state where the people don't degrade themselves further and create further chaos. So it's hard to just pick up your bag and go. Thirdly, you can't wholesale apply democracy the way it is applied in the European world. Because local customs and mores must be taken into account. It needs to be done. But the question of going to fight, this is plain stupidity. It's a theoretical one. Jihad that you read about the companions doing, with the Prophet leading them in the Battle of Badr and Uhud and other things, is entirely different from what's happening now in the modern world. It's entirely different. This is called that jihad, especially when there are terrorism involved, killing innocent people, and also the extreme elements out there. What are you getting involved in? It's not jihad. It's just for a good, let's have a fight. I used to do that when I was young, in school, with the mates, so let's have a fight. See who wins, just for the sake of punch up. Brawl. Anyway.